You're very welcome to the Firm and Fast Golf Podcast. I'm your host, Shane Darby. I'm very pleased to welcome Graeme Beatt to the podcast today. Graeme is the current course manager at Royal Portrush Golf Club. He originally hails from St Andrews in Scotland and was originally introduced to greenkeeping at Scots Craig Golf Club before moving on in turn to Kingsbarns, Royal Melbourne, Castle Dargan, County Sligo, and finally to his current position at Royal Portrush. Over the course of our chat, we take a look at Graeme's career journey thus far. Needless to say, focusing primarily on the before, during and after periods that straddled the 148th Open Championships, which were held at Royal Portrush in July 2019. I've been fortunate to play a number of open road courses, and Portrush for me is the very best that I've seen. If you've yet to play it, you simply must put the Dunluce and indeed the Valley courses on your bucket list. Many thanks to Graeme for his time. We really do hope that you enjoy our chat. Hi Graeme, you're very welcome to the Firm and Fast Golf Podcast. How is all on the Causeway Coast?
Thanks for having me, Shane. Everything's going well at the moment. I think we're in for a bit of nasty weather next week, but we've had a good winter so far.
Yeah, I heard there's some snow on the way potentially, and you're more likely to get it up on the North Coast than we are in Dublin, so best of luck.
Thank you.
I believe you're just back from Royal Troon and an RNA Open Rota gathering. How did your trip go?
Very well, thanks. Yeah, it was jam-packed. So the RNA had organised lots of speakers and things, and they hosted the event. So yeah, it was really good. It's interesting. Those information about how the RNA see the Open progressing and all that sort of stuff. So it was excellent. It was really well run.
And did you get an opportunity to bring the sticks with you, or was it just a talking and catching up gig?
Unfortunately, it was a flying visit.
Next time.
I haven't played Troon before. We dropped into Prestwick and had a coffee there.
Okay.
Dave Edmondson, who was at the island before, he's at Prestwick now.
That's right, yeah.
So yeah, I had a good chat with Dave, caught up with him, and then went over to Troon.
Have they still got the old holes in the ground, or have they grown back over at this stage? I know they opened...
I don't think so. We were kind of only had time to be around the clubhouse, but just looking out on the course, it looked great, really tidy. I'm sure Dave will do a great job there.
Well, listen, we're just at the start of March. There I am again, dating this particular podcast. But anyway, as we said, the weather is warming up, but it may be warming down a little bit next week. I trust that both the Dunluce and the Valley courses are coming out of the winter hibernation in rude health. Did you have any significant winter works on the go this year?
We had a little bit, few bits and pieces on Dunluce. I suppose since the Open, we've done quite a lot of work to the Valley in terms of greenkeeping and sort of general tidying up ourselves. This winter, we did a little bit of construction on Dunluce. Small things, I suppose, lots of little jobs, but things that will make the golf course better for members and visitors, and some of it for the Open as well.
Okay. As I've already alluded to, you currently hold the position of course manager at Royal Portrush Golf Club. Over the course of our conversation today, I hope to take you down a little trip down memory lane to learn about your circuitous route from St Andrews to the north coast of Ireland, with a few interesting detours along the way. The opening question has to lead us back to your first memories of golf around the East Nuke of Fife. What are some of those early memories?
I think... Well, I got into golf because of, partly my parents, but my uncle as well. He was a good golfer. He was a county golfer. He had cut down a set of clubs for me to get started. And I joined Scots Craig Golf Club when I was 10. That was my local golf club. So they've got a real rich history. It was founded in 1818. So it's one of the oldest clubs in the world, but I just remember playing there growing up as a junior, and golf courses weren't that busy then. We'd get dropped off in the morning for summer holidays and then picked up at night, and you'd have a couple of pounds to spend and seemed to just do. But we used to play the course in the morning, go to the practice ground, spend a few hours there, and then we'd go maybe play the course cross country and make up our own holes. But it was great. Absolutely loved golf. Sort of grew up dreaming of being a tour pro. And then my cousin, I think I got to 14 or 15, and my cousin was the accountant for Elmwood College, and she'd suggested greenkeeping. And I sort of thought, why would I want to do that? And then when I was old enough, I got a summer job at the golf course and absolutely loved it. And that was me kind of hooked on greenkeeping from then, really.
So it's the summer job at Scots Craig that started in 1995.
Yeah.
What motivated you? I mean, obviously, you mentioned that your relative was working in Elmwood College. Was that really the motivating factor to initially explore the sports turf world, or was anybody else whispering into your ear and leading you in that particular direction?
Well, I was still sort of looking down the road of actually playing the game. And then I kind of realised I wasn't probably good enough. And I think my handicap was low enough to sort of maybe get an assistant professional's job, but I didn't really fancy kind of that sort of life. I was kind of an outdoors person. I was always outdoors doing something, playing football or playing golf or just anything. And yeah, I just think the experience of actually doing it, I just loved it. And being around the golf course and just being out there, I just found it great.
Yeah, so you found your vocation, as it were.
I think so, yeah.
Happy days. It's great when that happens, because work doesn't necessarily feel like work. It feels like just having fun and doing what you should be doing.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Having been bitten by the greenkeeping bug, obviously, Graeme, what educational steps did you take initially on your journey in turf?
So I worked a summer at Scots Craig, and then I went to Elmwood College and did the 1 year greenkeeping course. And then I got a full-time job at Scots Craig again in '96. And then I think I did another year and a half, maybe. And then I signed up for the HNC. Mm-hmm. It's like a one day a week release for 2 years. And then I completed that. And then just as I completed that, I moved on to Kingsbarns.
And that was the year 2000, yeah, from memory.
Yeah, it was early 2000. Yeah, it was still it was coming towards the end of the construction phase, and it was more growing.
Okay.
So a little bit of both. But that was amazing. That was like just so different to a sort of, the normal golf club that I'd come from. There were no members. There was like this massive push on to get the golf course finished for the Open at St Andrews in 2000. And yeah, there's just a real buzz about it. And because it was brand new, and because we were also such a big part of getting the golf course ready, everyone had a real ownership for it. You really felt like sort of you kind of a bit of it was yours, if you know what I mean.
Excellent. And if I'm right, I think the following year, 2001, was the first year of the reimagined Alfred Dunhill Links Championship, which obviously replaced the Alfred Dunhill Cup.
Yeah.
Was this event your first exposure to a high-level European Tour event?
Yeah, I suppose it was. My first season at Scots Craig, we'd had the Open qualifying. So Justin Rose was trying to qualify. I think that was his first one. Mm-hmm. So I'd had to meet his family and show him around the golf course. I was junior captain at the time. So I'd spent the day with him for that. But that was a big thing for us. And I went to the Open in '95 as a junior. And yeah, the Dunhill was a big thing for us. Uh-huh. And just the time of year it's played, it's pretty tricky for setting up a tournament. And I'd never really experienced that before. We were sort of mowing greens with floodlights and things like that. but it was really exciting.
That was probably good practice for you getting the West of Ireland Championships up and running so early in Ross's Point. But we'll get to that in due course. I've heard you mention colleagues Stuart McCallum and Innes Knight as turfies that you looked up to when you got to Kingsbarns. Other than their focus on fine detail and perfection, what other good habits do you think you picked up from the aforementioned gentlemen?
I think just customer experience, that probably relates to attention to detail as well. I think their professionalism was really good. But those were the big things really for me. To come from a golf club where the standards were quite good, to go to Kingsbarns where it was just like exceptional. And I think completing every task to your best ability, I think that was really a big sort of, I suppose it was left a mark on me sort of thing to sort of see that side of it. And as I said, we were all kind of in it together, and we were all part of getting that standard to where it had to be so quickly. So I think that was really a big thing for me with the two of them. Stuart was a real stickler for timekeeping as well, which I do remember that was his big bugbear.
With Stuart, you'd always try to be 5 minutes early than as opposed to 5 minutes late, but the sense.
Exactly. Yep.
It's a good habit to be in anyway, isn't it?
Stuck with me as well, yeah.
While you were at Kingsbarns, you got the opportunity to do some travelling, and I understand that you spent 4 months or so on the Greens team at Royal Melbourne. How did that opportunity materialise?
We'd had a guy from Royal Melbourne, Simon Miller. He's now at Dunes Links. He was involved with Cape Wickham as well. He'd come over to us to work a season. And I'd sort of got friendly with him, and one of the greenkeepers from Kingsbarns had gone over to Royal Melbourne to work there for the season. So that was kind of the start of an exchange programme. And I just fancied it. I just fancied the change. I fancied experience in kind of warmer season grasses and the management of it. So I decided to write to the R&A. Wrote them a nice letter. They called me in for a meeting. It turned out they knew my uncle as well, so that might have been a help. But they offered to pay my flights over in return for me writing some reports based on the sort of management of the turf over there, and we had the Heineken Classic over there as well. So I wrote 2 reports for them one based around the Heineken Classic and the preparations and the way the tournament was run, and also around the comparisons of turf management between Australia and ourselves. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it was a great experience. Amazing.
Did you find the adjustment between warm and cool season grasses difficult to get your head around, or is it as, or how did you find it? Because obviously they're predominantly Cooch and I know the Sutton's mix, etc., etc.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of fescue as well, but predominantly the warm season grasses would obviously be your Santa Ana Cooches or your Bermuda, yeah.
Yeah, I suppose it was a stark contrast, really. I'd gone over there and they were scarifying fairways on, I think it might have been on the east. Mm-hmm. And they were quite thatchy, and the amount of material they removed, mm-hmm. Loaded into a lorry and taken away.
Was that the phrase mowing that they do in terms of just having a right old go at the plant in the ground? Yeah, it's phenomenal, isn't it?
Phenomenal, and the recovery is just turn the water on. And
but as you say, there's so much bloody material.
Yeah, it's crazy. I couldn't get my head around that, and then there's a lot of tea tree and eucalyptus and any sort of wind at all, and it was just blown to pieces. So I worked with the tree surgeons quite a bit, just helping them clean up and all that sort of stuff. The bunkering over there, I just couldn't get over how good it is. It's just amazing. The firmness of the greens as well, that was something that really sort of stood out, I think. They were spraying all the time. Yeah. I think any warm season climate, there's so many more bugs and diseases and things than we encounter over here. But yeah, it was really interesting just to sort of compare and contrast.
And in terms of timing, I know Richard Forsyth is the current course superintendent over there. Did you have an opportunity to work with Richard while you were at Royal Melbourne?
No, I didn't. I was working with Jim Porter at that time. Funny, we've just set up an exchange program with Royal Melbourne, so I've been sort of dealing with emailing Richard Forsyth quite a bit backwards and forwards. So we have a greenkeeper over there at the moment. Mm-hmm. And it was just something that we wanted to do for our greenkeepers' experience, and also for some of the Australian guys to experience the European links. Mm-hmm. I think it's just such a good experience for me. I just felt like I'd like to sort of offer that for our own sort of young staff that want to gain a bit of experience too.
No, for sure. I mean, that experience of soaking in the spirit of Dr. Mack and Alec Russell, Mick Morecambe, and obviously Claude Crockford, their memories and experiences kind of reverberate throughout the Royal Melbourne paddocks. Is there anything particularly that strikes you as the main components that Royal Melbourne get right as a course and a club that you've perhaps taken on to your further career?
It's a tricky one. As I say, I love the bunkering. I think it just makes the golf course, just makes it so good. The nature of their sand, I'd said before, the firmness of the greens was just unbelievable. And I'm not sure that that's something we can really replicate, but I think it's just, I don't know really how to answer. I think, I don't know that there's a massive amount relates to likes of Royal Portrush. You know, we don't have much scrub. Our bunkers are far different. The bunkers maybe don't play such a part in the golf course here. But I do remember the presentation was amazing, and it just seemed like a really nice club with a good atmosphere.
You made it back to Scotland after your 4 months away, and then subsequently would move on to take on your first course manager position at Castledargan in County Sligo. Darren Clark and Patrick Merrick design collaboration. I guess after 4 or 5 years there, you moved down the road to become a superintendent at County Sligo Golf Club.
Yeah.
Ross's Point, of course, has a cult and Allison heritage and has been home of the West of Ireland Championship since the first staging in 1923. The West represents the traditional Easter time beginning of major amateur elite competition in Ireland. How challenging was, and in fact is, it to prepare a course for the West in the early part of the growing season? Because we're talking Easter, and sometimes Easter is really early. It's a little bit later this year, I suppose. Yeah. But what challenges does that represent to the likes of your good self, beavering away, to trying to get it in the best condition possible for an early start?
It's not that easy. You're kind of thinking of it from probably November time. And it limits you to what you can actually do to the greens through the winter time. You're sort of nursing them through the winter, knowing that you've got the West of Ireland, really early, sometimes in March. And also, when the West comes along, if it is sort of March time, you haven't had any growth. The greens are a little bit sparse, so you can't do an awful lot to them. Otherwise, they get a bit out of control with green speed. Mm-hmm. I know, obviously, Sligo's a pretty windy place. And I think just to have them in good condition going into it, you're not able to do a massive amount of mowing and rolling and all that sort of stuff that you would normally do to get the surfaces up to a standard that you'd like. But yeah, I think just kind of gentle management over the winter was the sort of best approach for me, I think.
Okay. I know Pat Ruddy was engaged by County Sligo to carry out some improvements to the course in 2013. Were you still at Ross's at the time, Pat, or with his equipment and his revitalisation plans?
It was just kind of a transition. I was just going out the door as Pat Ruddy was coming in. I was there for maybe a week of diggers being on site and things. So I wasn't really that involved. Mark Miller had come in and he'd taken over from me not long after I had left. So he's carried out most of the construction work, along with the local contractor and Pat Ruddy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, as a complete aside, it's funny you mentioned Mark there, small world. I was down in Carn Golf Club in Belmullet before Christmas with Ali McIntosh and bumped into Mark. So a good lad. I believe he's still involved in some way or other in a consultancy basis up in Rosses.
That's right. Yeah. He works, as you say, as a consultancy, but consultancy basis. He does a few days a week there, I think, and does some of his own stuff as well. Believe he's busy.
Yeah. No, he was down doing some construction on the T block behind the clubhouse. They've done a big job down there and sort of pared away a dune for fill and whatnot. So it's really, really, really nice job. I have to say, I saw some aerials of it last week. Maybe if we move on to the main event, as it were, obviously Portrush, and I believe you started there in November 2014. I'm interested, first of all, to understand what your first thoughts were when you heard that Joe Findlay decided to retire from his course manager position at Royal Portrush after 26 years, and that there might be a job going up on the North Coast.
I suppose, firstly, I loved Ross's Point. I loved Sligo. We'd been there for over 8 years. Had some really good friends there, but I couldn't really not apply for the job in Portrush. Chance to host an Open Championship, and I suppose it's just such an amazing golf courses, both of them. Great site, with lots of potential as well. So, yeah, if I'm honest, I thought I maybe had a chance of getting it. I feel really lucky, privileged that I did manage to get the job. So yeah, everything's worked out really nicely, to be honest. My kids were at a good age as well. They were only 1 and 4.
Brilliant. Okay.
It just all worked out really nicely.
And then, needless to say, the Open project or an effort to once again host the Open Championship had begun some years before you came on board. A long time in coming, obviously, prior to the arrival of the 148th hosting in 2019. It had been 68 years since Max Faulkner secured the Claret Jug in 1951. The peace dividend, the Good Friday Agreement, and Stormont power sharing were all waypoints on the journey towards an eventual RNA announcement pertaining to Portrush and a return to the Open Championship hosting duties. I know the first major step was to prove to the RNA that the course could host the European Tour event. And to this end, the 2012 Irish Open was held at Royal Portrush, won by Jamie Donaldson of Wales. Needless to say, the successful hosting of this event really proved to the important stakeholders that the course could hold an event of that nature. There obviously would be some significant impediments pertaining to logistics, traffic, course, facilities, etc. Before we get into some questions about member and stakeholder engagement and the development of the vision for a new version of Royal Portrush, we might just touch on some of the challenges that needed to be addressed to optimise the site for open hosting duties. What were those main challenges?
I think the real turning point for Portrush was when Peter Dawson visited for the Irish Open and walked the course, and I think he was the real positive person behind it all. And I think he had contacted the club and contacted Martin Ebert and said, like, we really want to do this. The problem was finding enough space really for hospitality, which meant that the 17th and 18th at the time had to become tented village. And the plans, I suppose, the Open keeps growing. It's getting bigger and bigger. And we're even finding that now for the next time we're going to have to find a little bit more space. But when I started in Royal Portrush, the plans were already in place. They hadn't been approved yet. They were being shown in the council room for the members to go and view. and the 17th and 18th were to be removed. That was going to become Tented Village. Some of the holes were going to be extended to create a bit more length, which meant there was kind of a knock-on effect. The Dunluce changed, which meant the valley had to change, which meant the sort of par 3 short course had to change as well. I suppose you take a bit of land from somewhere and then you have to find it somewhere else.
As you pointed out, MacKenzie and Ebert were appointed as consulting architects in 2013 and would develop and implement an improvement plan that would encompass quite a lot of work. So 7 new holes, 2 in the Dunluce, now the 7th and the 8th, in addition to 3 in the valley. 34 tees, 22 bunkers, 2 miles of road, 18 miles of pipe and ducting, not to mention water, sewage, services, fibre, etc., etc. We can sort of fast forward maybe to Friday the 29th of August in 2014. The members of Royal Portrush convened for a special general meeting at the Maryleboy Hotel in Portrush. Of the 237 members that attended the meeting, all but 2 of those present voted in favour of the proposals. The journey to the 148th Open had begun in earnest. If I've done my research properly, you started in Royal Portrush in November 2014, which probably means that you were working your notice period at County Sligo by the time the members' vote took place. I can imagine that there were a not insignificant number of trips between Sligo and Portrush to schedule during this handover period. Would that be a fair reflection?
Yes.
so you wore a furrow in the road, in other words, between Sligo and Portrush, I would suspect.
Yeah, I was up and down a few times. Yeah, they are a neighbour back and forwards for meetings, so I was going to attend a meeting every so often, and just the scale of the discussions is kind of mind blowing, really. And for me, it was kind of I suppose a sink or swim moment when you start, and we were more or less straight into construction plans, and then construction started in July 2015. And yeah, it was maybe five diggers and 3 dumpers and all sorts of kit all over the site. So just managing that was difficult. And the golf courses were still sort of fully booked, and we were still taking visitors and all that sort of stuff. So it was a busy start, and it didn't slow down much for a good few years. But an amazing challenge.
For any listeners that haven't been to Portrush yet, how would you characterise the site that the Dunluce and the Valley courses sit gently upon?
I think it for me, it sits so well in its environment. Both courses, I think they're really natural. I love the way the bunkers and all the shapes kind of tie together. Sometimes you'd see a golf course where something's kind of perched there and it maybe doesn't sit naturally in its own environment. I think Portrush, I just think it fits so well with the surroundings.
You must really have to pinch yourself sometimes as you tootle around in your Toro Workman or triplex. You must have one of the best jobs in the world from a greenkeeping perspective.
Yeah, I think we all do. I think anyone that works there, and I think most greenkeepers probably are the same. Such an enjoyable job most of the time. Not always, but yeah, I feel really lucky. I do.
Given all of that bill of works that we just mentioned, or I just mentioned a few minutes ago, and I believe that the site, the Royal Portrush Golf Club site, is on a site essentially governed by national heritage. If that's the case, I'm assuming you had an ecologist keeping a watching brief as the works progressed.
Yep, we had Bob Taylor. We had Bob Taylor, who worked for the STRI at the time. He's independent now, and he's the RNA's ecologist. He had done a massive file of work on breeding bird surveys and botanical surveys and every survey you can imagine as part of the planning process. He was sort of on site regularly throughout the whole construction process as well. We had archaeologists on site checking the site for anything of importance as well. I came to Royal Portrush and I was just so impressed how professionally everything was done. It was just amazing. So yeah, we've continued that, and Joe Finlay had he was already working with Bob Taylor and the STRI, and they were doing breeding bird surveys. They had a 5-year master plan for all the ecology, and that's something that we've continued.
The change, as you say, you had to find some extra space to fill the gap that closing holes 17 and 18 on the Dunluce necessitated. So I'm just wondering, I mean, two of my favourites on the Valley were definitely the 2 holes that were lost.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, 2 original cold holes, a short par 4, if I recall, and a longish sweeping par 3. I will stick up a couple of pictures just for posterity of the old holes. There is something that I like looking back on every now and then. But just in terms of that space that you used, or what were the main challenges in relation to the sort of construction of 7 and 8? I'd imagine there was a lot of marram grass to transplant and harvest and sort of keep in relatively decent condition while you were sort of betwixt and between in terms of shaping and then laying the stuff back out. What do you remember specifically in relation to the challenges that sort of 7 and 8 would have thrown up?
I think, as you said, you've hit the nail on the head. It was trying to find a home for all the material that came off. I remember that it took a long time to strip the 8th, because the 8th was just all marram grass, kind of low-lying, sort of low dunes. Mm-hmm. So as each other part of the project was being finished, the marram grass would go from there to then sort of create the rough around other areas. So the 8th fairway wasn't really cleared until most of the other work was complete, really. I'm trying to remember dates now, but I think 7 and 8, particularly the 8th, was one of the later things done in the project.
And those holes opened June 2017, yeah?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. So in terms of the construction and shaping process, Graeme, did you use a main contractor and have some MacKenzie Ebert shapers, or how did the mechanics of personnel on site pan out?
I suppose I can't remember. It might have been prior to me starting Royal Portrush or just afterwards. We were looking to appoint a contractor. So Abbott's had done the irrigation system in 2009. They'd installed a full system. So
that's MJ Abbott, yeah?
MJ Abbott's, yeah. Mm-hmm. So I remember we felt that it would be a good idea to keep sort of continuity there. So they did the irrigation contract for all the changes. And then I think we had looked at a few different companies, and there was some other pretty big projects happening at that time, Turnberry. Mm-hmm. So the feeling was that some of the other companies were quite stretched. Martin Ebert had done quite a lot of work with First Golf, Marcus Terry, at the time, and an architect to be quite particular about which shaper they'll work with. So Martin sort of guided us towards First Golf, and Marcus Terry's unbelievable on the machine. The shaping, the quality of it was incredible. So we went with First Golf and MJ Abbott's.
Okay, and is he a dozer preferrer, or is he a preferrer of diggers and whatnot, or what's his implement of choice, or a bit of both?
Excavator. Okay. Excavator. In fairness, he did the 8th fairway with the dozer, mm-hmm. In one weekend, which I just couldn't get my head round. And once he completed it, it didn't need much alteration at all, really. It was great job, really good.
Was that plateau, as it were, for the 8th? Was that there naturally, or was there some fill involved there? I could never quite figure out how much work was done. Always the mark of a good bit of finishing, but
where the green is.
Where the green is, and more particularly it's the drive area and that sort of fall off to the left.
That was always there.
Okay.
It was kind of masked by the small dunes that were where the eighth fairway is now. And to be honest, it was really hard to actually picture a fairway being there. The first time I walked it, Martin Ebert had pegs through it, and you're up and down over these dunes, and it was kind of hard to actually picture anything being there. I think there was a drop off to the left, because that went down towards the fifth green on the valley.
Yeah.
And then in short of the green, I think there was a dip, but I can't remember exactly with the way the ground was shaped at that time.
Yeah. Certainly in terms of comparing the new 7 and 8 versus the old 17 and 18, you've a pair of much stronger holes now. And obviously it's given you the opportunity to utilise 17, what was the old 17 and 18 in a different manner. Yeah, we've mown out 6 little par 3 holes.
Okay.
Which have been really popular with the members. It's quite flat. Some of our elderly members will go out there and play a few holes together, and it's quite a good little academy for some of the kids as well.
Brilliant. You love to see that, to be honest with you. I believe we may have a short course coming in Royal Dublin in the not too distant future with a bit of luck. But I think we've got to move a road first of all before we start doing anything else.
Oh, excellent.
I'm just interested to sort of get a feel, Graeme, for how long you actually had machinery on site and heavy metal on site. I mean, obviously the project started, as you said, in 2015.
Yeah.
I believe you may have had machinery on site up to nearly the start of the event in 2019. Is that a fair reflection?
Yes. I suppose we had machines on the course through the winter, maybe starting in October and finishing in April, late April, maybe May.
Mm-hmm.
That was a general sort of thing for a couple of years. And then, I think the last excavator left site in May 2019.
Mm-hmm.
We sort of built some spectator paths a little bit last minute. But that left it a little bit tight. Wouldn't like to do that again, really.
Well, you know what? Hindsight is 2020. You got out the gap. That's all that matters.
Exactly. Yeah.
Listen, the tension between frivolous architectural features and functionally maintainable aesthetic shaping is always a challenge for the architect, the shaper, and indeed you, the course manager. I'm assuming that you probably had some degree of input into what was and what was not maintainable in the medium to long term.
Yes. Probably. Well, there was a few things. In fairness, Martin Ebert was actually quite easy to work with. He has a sort of a vision, and he can be quite stubborn, which I think is probably a bonus as well if you're an architect. But no, he was always willing to listen. If there was something that we felt was a bit too steep, then he would be happy enough to adjust it, unless it was a feature that he felt was really, really necessary.
Mm-hmm. And certainly from a posterity perspective, Big Nelly was a feature of the old 17th hole, which I believe you have a Little Nelly now on the 7th. Maybe not quite as big as Big Nelly, but not insignificant in its own way.
No, I suppose in comparison to all of our other bunkers, it is huge, but not quite as big as the original Nelly. No.
Yeah.
But quite a nice feature.
I've been in there once. It's not a place to be.
No. No, you're not going to make the green from there.
You certainly aren't. And it usually plays into the second wind. That's why I ended up in there in the first place, I suspect. But listen, obviously, in terms of your Open Championship prep, Royal Portrush hosted the 2018 Boys Amateur Championship. How useful was it to get a slightly smaller trial run under your belt some 12 months or so before the 148 came along? It
was great, actually. It was good. suppose it highlighted a few little challenges that we had. And I think, yeah, an amateur event like that, it's actually really nice. It's quite relaxed, but at the same time, you have to sort of deliver the golf course to a certain standard. We kind of experienced similar weather to what we did in 2019. We got torrential downpours prior to the boys' event, and then we got a sort of flush of growth, which made green speeds a bit challenging. And then we had the same again in 2019. Be it 2018, we were able to triplex cut, which was a much quicker setup. But then obviously 2019 we had more people. I suppose our main challenge was just getting green speed, really, because it was so wet. We had thunder, thunder and lightning, rain the Wednesday before practice day. So we got 35 millimeters of rain in an hour, and we had 65 millimeters that day.
Graeme, it never rains in Ireland. Never rains in Ireland.
It was probably quite fitting, really, wasn't it? Rain, wind, cold, warm.
Yeah, it sounds like an Irish summer's day.
Yeah.
if you don't like the forecast, just wait an hour. Come here. I'm just interested to know. Obviously, the R&A and their different departments are obviously heavily involved in staging an Open. How many of those particular departments would have required your involvement, shall we say, in some capacity, sort of pre-Open? Is there a lot of meetings and conversations and additional stuff over and above actually overseeing the guys and making sure the sports turf is as it should be?
Yes, lots. I suppose from at that time that there was some of the R&A staff would be involved in spectator movement, hospitality areas. Some of them would be involved with the contractors and the build and the D-Reg. Some of them would be involved with the communications side, the fibre, TV areas, sort of broadcasting area, which was down at the East Strand car park. And then there was the course setup guys, there was the agronomy guys, there was the ecology guys, and I can't even think of all of them. But then there's other sides like transport, where Wilma, the general manager at the time, she would have dealt with a lot of they have sort of a gold, silver, and bronze meetings, which would be more higher level. It would be involved with sort of emergency services and all that sort of stuff. Mm-hmm. So I didn't really get involved in all that side, which, to be honest, I was glad I had enough. I had enough on my plate.
It sounds like.
Yeah,
and Wilma, of course, a very capable lady.
Yes,
who's since retired, or certainly not retired. She's moved elsewhere.
Yes,
I believe she's working in Sport NI amongst other things.
Yeah,
and John Lawler's obviously up there now.
Mm-hmm.
I hope Wilma's doing well if she's listening. I have had the pleasure on a few occasions. A very formidable lady.
Yeah, she's formidable. She usually gets what she wants. She's a real character. I was talking to her about an hour ago, actually. She's doing really well. She's sort of got some other work that she's doing, and she's keeping busy, and she's involved with the Irish Links initiative now. Mm-hmm. So she's doing a lot of the administration and membership stuff for that as well. She likes to be busy doing things.
Well, Fintan Brennan's obviously signed up the absolutely the right person to do that for him.
Yeah.
Listen, in terms of the infrastructure build, can you give us some idea on build timeframes associated with grandstands, tented villages, TV cranes, concession stands, etc., and maybe what considerations are required when you cover grass with infrastructure such as that? What sort of preventative maintenance, or in fact, what sort of maintenance has to happen to those areas after breakdown afterwards? I guess I'm really trying to get a feel for the sort of headaches you had prior to the stuff going up, while it was up and as it was coming back down?
Yeah, so the first contractors come on site at the start of April.
Okay.
They're the grandstand guys. And I suppose the first thing for us is just checking where all of our irrigation pipes are. And that's an ongoing thing throughout the whole build, really. And at first it starts off quite slow. They start with a smallish team. They're doing the grandstands. It's quite easy. And then the more contractors come on site, the more it sort of becomes almost a full-time job for one of our guys working with them. So Chris Calvin, who looks after our irrigation system, he kind of dealt with a lot of the contractors, took a lot of pressure off me, because you're constantly going around checking there's no irrigation pipes where they're driving in their big pins and anchors and things. They use big water tanks to anchor down the TV towers and all that sort of thing. And even just getting them around the golf course without making any mess or damaging the place because they don't know the site. And it's really important that you can assist them to get around without causing any damage, because it'd be really easy to just take a wrong turn and next thing you're on the green or something. So no, it worked really well. I suppose in terms of reparation afterwards, it's the grandstands, the dereg happens much quicker than the build. Contractors maybe have somewhere else they have to be, another event or something. So the R&A have their own site managers, so they're responsible for all the health and safety. Contractors, anything the contractors do, really, the site managers take responsibility for, and they're really strict. So that's really useful for us. I suppose the only thing, screws, the sort of shackles that they put the fencing together with, things like that, just get dropped by accident and left in the grass. Of course, our mowers tend to find them. That was probably the worst thing for us. We had screws. We were catching with our mowers for maybe a year afterwards. That's like really unhelpful. Our mechanic was nearly in tears.
I can imagine. I said the sharpening machine was getting used used in the red, as it were, in terms of just consistently.
Yeah, that was probably the worst bit for us. Because of the nature of the ground at Royal Portrush, we're really undulating, which makes it great for viewing for spectators and things, but for building grandstands and walk-in platforms and towers and all sorts of stuff, often they'll have to dig the footings into the turf. So we had thousands of holes left afterwards. They're only small, they're only maybe 2 feet square, but when there's thousands of them, that took a wee while to repair all of that.
Yeah. And I guess just if we sort of take a look quickly at tournament week, I'm just sort of interested to know how many staff and volunteers you had at your disposal in 2019.
Yeah, we had 30 of our own staff. Some of those were seasonals from Australia. Some of them were part-timers. And then we had a total of 58 for the week of the Open. So the R&A will organise every Open. Each kind of Open venue will have the opportunity to send a greenkeeper to help out at whatever venue it might be hosting that year. So I think we had 8 or 9 Open venue volunteers. So they come for 2 weeks, generally speaking. And then there were other guys who were maybe superintendents of golf courses locally. They would have come and helped for just the 4 days or maybe the week. So yeah, we had 58 in total, which is probably quite a big number for an Open Championship or an event in UK or Ireland. But as you mentioned, you never know what the weather's going to do here. And you have visions of the squeegees in 2015, I think it was. And you just hope that you don't get that. But then you want to make sure that you've got enough people that can cope with something like that as well.
I think if squeegees are part of the lexicon for 2025, you might need 116 people. So hopefully that does not transpire in that particular way. But look at obviously the event itself. We had, if memory serves, we got a winner that the crowd seemed pretty happy about. Just wondering, did you get to share a pint with Shane after his win?
No, he did. He came over for a photograph. After his victory, we were still kind of all around the green, and he came over and got his picture taken with all the greenkeepers. What a winner! Like, couldn't have written it. Played absolutely amazing golf. I was supposed to go to the clubhouse afterwards, drinks reception with the winner. I went and locked the greenkeeper's sheds, and I had a set of RNA waterproofs I had to hand back. So I did that. It was chucking it down with rain, and then I spotted my wife and kids walking down the road. They'd been there all day. So I just picked them up and went home.
You had a better offer. And by the sounds of it, he hightailed out of there pretty quickly.
Yeah, I think
if the video is of him back in Dublin later on that evening or anything to go by.
Yeah, fair enough, really. You win the Open, you're going to want to enjoy it with your friends, aren't you?
Absolutely. Look, I came across something back in February 2022 that I just quickly wanted to mention. Specifically Storm Franklin. High tides lashed White Rocks Beach, which is obviously situated directly below the 5th green and the 6th tee box on the Dillnews course at Royal Portrush. Yeah. Again, I will post a couple of links to some Twitter posts. Just wondering, was there much damage done? There seemed to be quite a bit of exposed rock armour after that particular event.
Yeah. Really the full length of the beach from White Rocks to East Strand Car Park. There was a big bite taken out of the bottom of the dune. The sort of large dune near the 6th tee. Normally at the end of the summer, that dune would have a sort of a bulge on the nose of it. Usually over the course of the summer, the sand blows up that dune. You can see it on a windy day. It's kind of traveling up and sitting there. And then often in the winter time, you'll get a high tide and it'll take a little bit off the bottom and then it'll flatten the dune off a bit. But no, it took a serious chunk out of the bottom of that dune and all the way along to the East Strand Car Park. I don't know how many millions of tons it must have taken, but we'd lost a big chunk of the dune, but also it had eaten in at the edge of the rock armour that we have behind the 5th green. So that was installed in the 80s. There was a huge storm which had taken a massive chunk off the dune. Joe Finlay had told me that the irrigation pipe that goes around the green, some of that was hanging in midair at the back of the green.
Jesus.
So they'd had a huge job. And I think they'd got funding from golf clubs all over the world to complete the work. There's a small section of rock armour behind the green. And then at the end of the rock armour under the 6th tees, there's a small section of gabion baskets. Now the gabion baskets just end really. And at the side of that where we were losing some of the dune. And we were in danger of the sea getting in behind the gabion baskets and exposing that, and then that's when you start to lose your rock armour as well.
So what did you have to do to try and rectify that particular input from nature?
We just let nature take its course, which just being sort of hopeful that you're not going to get another storm and then it's going to cause more damage. It did fill into a point. We've had a little bit more erosion, but nothing like the storm that we had. But the club have been in a really, really long process of trying to get planning and complete some extra small work just to tie those gabion baskets into the dune so that the sea can't get in behind it and cause more damage.
So you've been okay in terms of tidal erosion since Storm Franklin, at least anyway.
Yeah, this winter hasn't been too bad, but it's just pot luck, really, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
You can get a bad storm out of nowhere, and then you're looking at sort of years for that to repair itself.
If we move on, Graeme, to your blogging and social media career, I obviously came across you when you moved from Sligo to Portrush initially. However, it wasn't long before your regular dispatches from the greenkeeping compound at Royal Portrush were regular reading material over a cup of tea. Your periodic dispatches from the Causeway Coast were educational and informative. I'm wondering, was writing the blog something you enjoyed, and will it be making a reappearance as you ramp up for the Open in 2025?
It was something I enjoyed. I suppose I had the idea of starting it really early on. There's a big percentage of our members are not from Portrush, and they maybe only make it up at the weekend. And our greenkeepers are out on the golf course doing lots of work during the week. And then I kind of thought maybe the members wonder what we actually do, and if we're doing a project on the course, how it's actually completed, because they're not maybe there every day to see it. And I think I will start it again. I'd stopped it because the club were doing a new website and a few different reasons, but I was to start writing a piece in the website. So I would hope to start it again. I think the members seem to really like it, and I used to get a lot of comments from the members that they enjoyed reading it and it was informative and all the rest of it. So,
well, I can assure you that the wider golf tragic world also was reading it and enjoyed it. So, as and when you get back to it, there'll be plenty of people like me with bated breath, waiting to get the next installment.
Thank you.
Look, I recently happened upon the extensive MacKenzie and Ebert 2022 year in review document and noticed that there are some plans afoot to further refine the Dunluce course while also making changes to the Valley course. What can you tell us about these refinements and changes in the lead up to 2025?
I suppose in terms of the Dunluce course, that's more or less done now. And as I said, they're not massive changes, but I think the little bits and pieces will make the golf course play better. I suppose the most significant one for an Open, we've built a new championship tee on 7, a little bit further back, probably adds 12, 15 yards maybe. And the sort of the wee Nelly bunker that was the feature down the right-hand side, I think it was 285 to the face of that bunker from the championship tee. And Martin Ebert, he said he couldn't believe people were just flying it. No problem at all. He said that the majority of the golfers did that. But it was 300 yards to carry the bunker on the flat. And I suppose the wind kind of swirled a lot, and sometimes that hole was playing downwind. But Martin Ebert said it was like some of the players didn't even give it a thought. So that was partly why I think he wanted to build a new tee a little bit further back. That's probably the most significant change, I think. That's very, very small alteration to the first green, and the first approach is probably another little change, but I don't think golfers would notice it unless they play the golf course all the time.
Okay, and the Valley, you've got a few bits and pieces to do down there as well.
Potentially, there's some plans being drawn up, and they're yet to go to the members for approval. So some of the plans look really exciting. but I suppose it just depends on the membership, so I can't really probably say too much about it.
No, for sure, for sure.
Trouble.
Look, it always amuses me, the Valley course and perhaps the Annesley at Royal County Down. They never quite get the kudos they deserve,
Yeah,
because they're slap bang beside the Dunluce and the big course at Royal County Down. I played the Annesley last year, which is always a delight. And I always, when I'm up in Portrush, I always make sure that I play the Valley, because it's nice as a warm up or a counterpoint to the big course, as opposed to getting not quite beaten to death. But particularly when it's windy there, you can have a particularly inclement day. But it's amazing. I mean, the Valley is just so good, and probably relatively underrated because of where it sits.
yeah. I love the Valley. I play the Valley most Sundays. We get a staff membership of Rathmore. So probably, yeah, I would say most of the greenkeepers play golf. And we would a lot of us would play the Valley on a Sunday in competition. We love it. And there's a lot of the Royal Portrush members would play the Valley regularly as well, more than there used to be. It used to be the ladies would play on the Valley and the men would play on Dunluce, but it's kind of becoming a bit more modernized, I suppose. There's lots of ladies going up and playing Dunluce and lots of men going up down and playing the Valley. And it's funny listening to people who, the likes of Stephen Watson, he started a couple of years ago going down to the Valley and having a game in the Valley, and he'd be talking about it and saying, why did I not do this before? Why didn't I play the Valley very often before?
Just for people that may be listening internationally, Stephen Watson is a BBC Northern Ireland sports journalist, sort of specialises in golf and rugby and various other things. But he'd be one of the higher profile members of the Royal Portrush. Would that be fair?
Yeah, I think so.
Himself and Mr. Nesbitt.
But yeah, all the members would talk like that. They maybe hardly would play it, and then they'd go down there, and then they would say, "Why don't we do this more often?" So there's much more of an exchange of golfers on the two different courses now.
That's good to hear. That's good to hear. You'll be glad to hear, Graeme, we're down to the final two questions. All my guests get asked the same final two questions. Firstly, I'd like you to nominate 5 bucket list courses that you would like to play for the first time, maybe, or they may have made a big impact on you previously, and perhaps you want to get back to sample them again. So, sorry, you had no advance notice on this, so it's the light is on and the pressure is on. But I'm sure you can come up with 5 bucket list courses. You can pick less, you can pick more. It's up to you.
You can probably hear the cogs turning. Cypress Point.
Okay. So somewhere you've played or somewhere you'd like to play?
Oh, sorry, somewhere I would love to play.
Okay, you haven't played Cypress Point. That's fine. Okay.
I met the superintendent over at the show in Orlando, so
okay,
someday I'll go over and I'll play there.
Well, at least so there is a way of you getting there. That's great.
Well,
happy to hear that. Okay. Well, you need to get in the plane first of all, I suppose. That's that's the biggest driver.
Where else? I'm probably going to be really boring and say I'm going to say Pine Valley. I'd love to play Pine Valley. It's probably the same golf courses that other people are talking about, but where else? I'd like to play Cape Wickham. That looks amazing. I played Royal Melbourne and Kingston Heath before, but I'd love to play them again. And I never played Metropolitan.
Okay.
I worked and lived there, and I never played Metropolitan. I'd love to go and play there.
Well, if you get an opportunity to play Metropolitan with Michael Clayton, who's a member there, I think that's probably the best person to bring you out there, because you just get to listen to Clayton and absorb everything that he has to say from a golf course architecture perspective. I never asked you. I mean, obviously, have you over the years developed an interest in golf course architecture, or was that something that came to you early, or a little bit later on through the greenkeeping process?
I think I've always had an interest. I wouldn't say I'm an expert, and I wouldn't say I'm very knowledgeable, but I do like to have an input, and I suppose some of the little changes that we've made over the golf course this winter have been maybe started with me. I'm not sure, but yeah, I definitely have an interest.
So the final question relates to golf book recommendations. What two books would you think and would you recommend to any golfer looking to augment their golfing library?
Oh dear, I'm not a huge reader, and my wife's an absolute bookworm.
Okay.
I kind of read a book when I'm on holidays, and
Mm-hmm.
golf books. Spirit of St Andrews, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I read a book quite recently. It was a caddy, his caddy in America, the Loop or something like that, or Looping, I think
Okay.
it's called. It
Yeah.
was okay.
Okay.
Practical Greenkeeping by Jim Arthur.
That's always a good recommendation. Yeah, I even have a copy of that.
Sorry, that's terrible. Yeah, I'm not a massive reader. I should be, and I'm a bit embarrassed.
Graeme, that's quite all right. You can't be good at everything. Listen, on behalf of our listeners, Graeme, I'd like to thank you for your time and insight. I'd like to wish you and the team at the golf club continued success and look forward to my next visit to Portrush with anticipation and onwards then to see if the Paddies can win back-to-back Opens at Portrush. Go easy.
Thanks very much, Shane. All the best. Thank you.
Many thanks for tuning in. As usual, you can find us online at firmandfast.golf or on Twitter at firmandfastgolf. Please continue to like, subscribe and comment. It really is appreciated. Until the next time, happy golfing.